what was the most important thing that a coach said about a rookie that you need to know for your fantasy football team. That more this week on the couch. Always a pleasure to be joined by Greg Brainos, Coach Speak Index. Learn it, live it, love it. A lot of stuff, and you're parsing. You're there. You're parsing. Some things I'm sure caught your attention. Rookies. We care about what coaches say about rookies after the draft. What stands out?
Dave Canales on draft night on Teteroa McMillan said, he's a baller. There's a simple way to look at it. When you watch film, the ballers show up and they make plays in big moments, and they're always looking to do something special.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a believer, right? And hopefully, this is where I like a lot of times like to say, Greg, like fantasy advice is just, well, here's things to monitor. Like I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I definitely want to hear about the Bryce Young, Teteroa McMillan connection, because if it's there, because he's a ball winner and he's not quite Mike Evans in terms of how formidable he is, but as far as how he uses his big frame and his long stride, build up speed to win, there's stylistic similarities, and Bryce Young can feed him for sure. So the whole Carolina offense I find really interesting. I know we just did your show recently, and I definitely think that a lot of attention is on Vegas, Jacksonville, Chicago, as offenses that could take a big step forward. Very important part of fantasy football, best ball. But Carolina's under the radar, right? And I mean, one of the reasons I love talking to you because I say teams take on the Panthers' personality of their coach and quarterback. And I mean, I know there's nobody more familiar with the personalities, or at least the media personalities. And you can always solve for X being like, this is their media personality. What can we assume about them when the cameras aren't rolling, right? You spend a lot of time with these coaches. And so talk to me about Dave Canales. Talk to me about the Panthers and whether you would buy into the idea of now Bryce Young and this team can take another step in year two.
Dave Canales, super, super positive guy. Even when negative things are happening or a question is asked about, last season, the Panthers not having a prime time game, and some other coaches might be like, oh, that's disrespectful, whatever. Dave Canales just says, hey, we got to earn it. We understand. Same thing when a bad call happens in a game, he's asked about it later. Other coaches might whine about the call and say, yeah, we're submitting the tape to the league. And Dave Canales just says, hey, we got to play better. We got to teach better. We got to play better. So, and no surprise yesterday when in his press conference, he's talking about the joy that Xavier Legette and Tet McMillan play with. And it's just so apparent. It's like bursting out of them. So he wants players who match his positivity, his intensity, his love for the game. Look at the running backs that he's drawn to, angry runners, guys that just absolutely love having the ball in their hands. And what you were saying about Tet McMillan, well, Dave Canales laid out a lot of those things on draft night, saying, what pops off the tape with Tet is how smooth he is, his body control. He can adjust to all different types of throws. He has a big catch radius. His hands are elite, catches everything outside his frame. He can win the jump ball down the field in the red zone. And Dave Canales talked about the red zone multiple times when talking about Tet McMillan. So that's a huge bullish thing. You got this really big receiver now who has excellent hands, like the best hands on this team now. And you go back and look at Dave Canales last year talking about Deontay Johnson in this X receiver role. And the first thing we want to think about on offense in the pass game is where's Deontay? Well, now it's where's Tet? He's the X receiver. This opens up Xavier Legette to play a more natural flanker position than the X he was forced into in the later half of last season. So, like you said, really, really perfect fit for what Bryce Young does well, for what Dave Canales does well. I think he's going to be just an instant success in Carolina.
Yeah, this is fun, and you led well with Canales' personality, because part of the reason I say that teams take on the personality of their head coach and quarterback is, it can be, take Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy, right? Peyton Manning's personality, much, much, not that there wasn't some, Tony Dungy in the final product, but and Bryce Young's personality is kind of, very humble, very much like he almost like wants to be in the background, so
Mhm.
Dave Canales' positivity is really important, and you can kind of see how that would have been a key ingredient in how, from the outside looking in, folks were saying, "Oh, they're already moving on from McMillan. Yeah, this is Josh Rosen, whatever. Like, new coach is going to say, no, I don't want to be saddled with this quarterback." And it sure seemed like everything that was happening was in alignment with that narrative. And then Bryce Young comes out of the bye and looks like he's developing into the quarterback that people thought he could become when he went number one overall. It wasn't like when Bryce Young went number one overall, there were people saying, like, this is ridiculous. He doesn't even belong in this conversation. So that's a pretty big deal what Dave Canales pulled off, handling those personalities. And then we want to see the connection. We want to hear all the connection, like you said, the connection between Young and McMillan. Because for a player like McMillan to flourish, and we saw Baker do it with Mike Evans last year. You just have to have a quarterback who's willing to believe in the receiver winning at the catch point, taking chances. And interestingly enough, McMillan played with his buddy Noah Fafita. I think his buddy from like going back to high school, um, and he stayed at Arizona he could have, jumped and made more money elsewhere, but he stayed to play with his buddy. So quarterback connection, you would then intuit that's pretty important to him. Okay, Coach Speak Index. I'm going to tell people again. This is just like, if you're doing, I don't want to make you blush, Greg, but what
Do it.
you're
Do it.
doing, no, what you're doing is shining a spotlight on an area like so many. Bucky Irving. I know we talked about this when I was on your show. Bucky Irving comes to mind. Like, but I feel like so many of the important narratives that if you saw them coming or you were quick to adopt, like, okay, this is what's happening, then you profited in fantasy football. And I think Bucky Irving is one of the easiest ones, where Liam Coen came right out and said, he runs the ball the way I want my running backs to run the ball. And if you watch Bucky Irving and then you watch Rashad White and you watch how Rashad White runs the ball, you'd say, like, they don't run the ball in the same way. Liam Coen saying he doesn't really want running backs to run the ball. I think he said something hopeful, like, yeah, I'm sure Rashad, all these guys, but he was telling us. And there were other developments last year. There are other twists that if you were just listening to the coaches, you didn't even have to analyze it really. Just listen, just let it wash over you. But you're doing a lot more than that. You're analyzing. And what I really love about what you're doing, Greg, is that, in this age of AI, don't get me started, in this age of AI, it'd be not that hard now to have something parse all the transcripts, right? And just immediately be able to
Yep.
tell you like what's everything Dave Canal said about Bryce Young, just and even like organize it and probably summarize it. So you the value you add can't just be just a library or encyclopedia
Mhm.
of what has been said. And I think even the accuracy ratings you do, AI could probably, if it's not able to do it now, like give it a couple of months or a year. It probably could also say like some sort of quotient to say like later on what happened and was this true or not. So even that's not the value. It's the human stuff, like what you were just talking about, like as a human being, observing another human being that you can add context to, that really is the thing that is a value add. I probably have said this before on the show, but I always envisioned, and I think of Matt Waldman as like the dean. I always envisioned when the third wave of football media really hit on the internet, it was democratic, and we all just did like you did, like we just started doing it, put our shingle up, that it would be like a university. We're doing an enterprise here, but there's something academic, at least in the purest way that I look at it. There's something academic about what we're doing, and you've kind of set up the department of Coach Speak Studies. You're there, you're the archivist, but you're also absorbing all of it. So I want to talk about the new head coaches and what your first impressions have been. And let's start with Liam Coen because everyone thinks Duval, and let's not let that overshadow a lot of time we have got to spend with Liam Coen. What are your impressions about Liam Coen as you've watched his press conferences?
He's he's a smart dude. Obviously, I think the biggest signal of that, isn't his press conferences, but just what we saw last year in Tampa Bay and how he's able to scheme guys just open by like 10, 20, 30 yards. And how he was able to take a running back like Bucky Irving, who was such a poor pass protector in college. And it's really hard for running backs coming into the NFL, regardless of how good they were in college at pass protection, but it's hard for them to NFL is like another big jump up. And he just hid that weakness by not really asking Bucky to block. He said, okay, well, we'll do a bunch of 21 personnel. We'll have two running backs out here. They don't know which one. Sometimes we'll have Bucky in the backfield. Sometimes we'll have Rashad. We'll have another one out. We'll sweep him out and sweep him in motion. This is just a smart guy, and he's paired now with another super smart guy in general manager James Gladstone. So the franchise, I believe, headed in a good direction. They're going to make a lot of smart moves. They're going to be smart on offense for sure. As far as reliability ratings for the new coaches, like I don't really do that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I try not to be like, okay, I think this guy is going to be honest
Right, right.
or whatever. Like until we have enough data on them, their reliability ratings are just kind of insufficient data. But the personality stuff we can definitely pick up on. So Liam Coen not afraid to call a player out, as we've just seen with Bashal Tutin, who had I think 10 fumbles over his last two seasons at Virginia Tech. His very first live rep in OTAs, he fumbles, and they ask Liam Coen, "Hey, how's Bashal Tutin doing?" He's like, "Well, he fumbled on his very first live carry." Not all coaches would bring that up, so that's definitely on the radar with him. If it ends up being a consistent thing, then usually it's okay. Well, when if they're praising some and calling others out, then that's usually like a pretty honest thing, right? They're not like lying about a guy when they call him out. And some coaches are like that. If a guy needs to be called out for fumbling or whatever, there are a mix of coaches who have no problem at all doing that, and I like that because it's a little bit easier to read the rest of what they say.
Yeah, you're right that just the whole thing can be so context dependent. Okay,
Mhm.
because like positive stuff, I really don't like. See, this is nice because it does give me a chance to get up on my soapbox and say and complain a little bit because Greg, there are people out there that'll say everybody's in the best shape of their life in May. Everybody's gonna have their career year, and it feels like this just dismissive attitude towards getting meaning, even if the meaning is just again like spending time, like old Bill Belichick. I don't even want to talk about why he's been in the news lately, but there was a time in the off season that if someone would ask the right question that would hit a nerve, like Navy or something like that, or football theory, and he would just go on this very lovely 5 or 6 minute discourse about something that shows you just how complex his relationship was with everything and how much of a real seeker he was intellectually with the game of football. And so even just so just saying I'm just going to ignore this, but when players get praised in the offseason, it can be genuine. It can be like Jameson Williams last year, right? That's another great example of one where coach speak, you had to see this coming. You had to
Yeah.
see this coming because like you said, you're also filtering it through the idea of, hey, does this coach say only positive things or only negative things? But you knew from the Lions coaching staff, and we can talk about Aaron Glenn next as a good transition, that if they're saying these things about Jameson Williams, they're not just saying it to like lift his spirits because he's had confidence problems. Because that's the other
Hmm.
side. there have been times that positive reports about a player is almost a negative indicator because they feel like they have to walk on eggshells and really not damage a player's confidence. And I think that's what was really, really interesting about this, looking at coach speak and thinking about how players are either praised or not. So let's go to Aaron Glenn, because Aaron Glenn seems like a straight talker with the
Oh yeah.
Jets. It's going to be interesting to see how New York receives that. But as fantasy players, we can get something out of that.
Yeah, I could tell pretty quickly that Aaron Rodgers was not gonna stick around. I believe from Aaron Glenn's like very first press conference, just like what he was saying about the QB position and about Aaron Rodgers. I was like, okay, this guy's gone. And then in his most recent press conference, he's talking about Justin Fields and what a genuine guy he is and what a leader he is and all this great stuff about Justin Fields. He's like, not every quarterback is like that. And then he made like basically a reference. Like he may as well have just said like, he may as well have just said Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, Aaron Glenn, like I feel like he's going to be a hard ass, and Ben Johnson as well. Like both of these guys coming from Detroit, it's not necessarily because of the environment that they were in Detroit, but that certainly could have thrown gasoline on that fire and been kind of a catalyst in kind of shaping and molding what kind of head coach they were going to end up being. But yeah, cards are on the table with Aaron Glenn, it seems.
And you touched on Justin Fields. I'm trying to buy Justin Fields somewhere,
Yeah.
like in my dynasty leagues, especially if you're in a super flex league, especially because what I was going to say when you were talking about Liam Coen too, and you said smart between him and Gladstone like 5 times, but also confident. And I really hope what can happen for Trevor Lawrence is that Coen can fill his head full of ideas about like how Urban Meyer and milquetoast Doug Peterson like didn't even give him a chance to become the player that he was destined to be in the NFL. And now we're going to do this just like we did with Baker back in Tampa. Like, let's do this. It's super, super exciting stuff. And likewise, Justin Fields, I mean, what has he had? Look at the regimes that he's been with in Chicago and then Pittsburgh and then Mike
Yeah.
Tomlin. I mean, we could rehash what Justin Fields did early in the season, but the team was winning.
Mm-hmm.
And you switch to Russell Wilson, and I'll even admit, as a Steelers fan, and being neurotic and letting my emotions get me carried away for the first few games, I thought, oh wow, like this team's beating teams they shouldn't necessarily be able to beat. Russell Wilson, maybe Russell, it really was Nathaniel Hackett, but no. No, it wasn't Nathaniel Hackett. And Justin Fields, once again, didn't really get a full chance to show what he can do. And now here's that Detroit connection again, Tanner Engstrand. And we'll see. We shouldn't assume that just because someone's from a coaching bloodline assumes they'll have similar success or do things the same way. But it does seem like there hasn't been a coach yet that has really embraced what Justin Fields does well. And just like you said about Bucky Irving, like you can make a player's usage mindful of what they've shown you that's hard for them. Just don't ask them to do that as much. So I'm excited about Justin Fields, and I hope that the kind of personality that Aaron Glenn is kind of frees him a little bit, to just because he's another one. Justin Fields is another one with like a pretty muted, like laid back personality.
Mm-hmm.
So like a big personality coach like Aaron Glenn is probably good for him to take the heat off, and then we'll see what Tanner Engstrand does with him. Okay, you mentioned Ben Johnson, hard ass part 2.
Oh yeah.
Smart is another word that's going to come in here. But Ben Johnson, I mean, you don't want to say Baker. Oh, Baker. What an interesting story. We're going to rehash that. That's a wonderful narrative to follow. We talk a lot about movies on and off the air. Like that would be a sort of cinematic story. But with Baker Mayfield, like he went into Cleveland being like, I know what's going on here. Factory sadness. I know that this is all bad and failure, and I'm going to turn it around. So Ben Johnson's going in, and Caleb Williams, they're going into a similar situation in Chicago. What have you observed so far from Ben Johnson?
Ben Johnson, very forward thinking head coach. Like you mentioned, definitely a hard ass. It may look super nice and sweet and Sunday morning church boy, but all reports from Detroit are that like he is on your ass in practice. And everything that we've heard about Ben Johnson and from Ben Johnson since he's been in Chicago have just shown that, yeah, okay, those reports are true. He came in not taking a shot at a specific player maybe, but just like kind of putting it out there. And some of these coaches will use press conferences as a way to get things across to their players. And it feels like Ben Johnson did that when he was, I believe, right around the NFL draft time, after they drafted Luther Burden, talking about the effort that they want to see from their wide receivers, and that we don't want to see guys when they know that they're not getting the ball. We don't want to see them being lazy. We don't want to see them not finishing routes. We don't want to see them not blocking on their assignments. And do you think, okay, well, is this about Luther Burden, who has this kind of diva tag attached to him, and he didn't show full effort all the time when he was in college? Or is it about DJ Moore, who literally walked off the field last year in the middle of a play? And then the one person that he's like really, really, really praising lately is Roma Dunze. So, I mean, big arrow up for Dunze there. But as far as Ben Johnson, I think one very important thing that he has said that we can apply to what their scheme will end up being, and in turn apply this to fantasy, is Ben Johnson talking about how turnovers on offense used to be looked at by people as an indicator of, would you win this game or not? And it's not actually turnovers that are most indicative. It's actually quarterback passing EPA. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do with Caleb Johnson is we don't need to throw a bunch of bombs with him. Like, we just need him to get the ball out. We want to raise his completion percentage. And we have all these players now have just absolute layups, intermediate short throws. We have all these guys that can get yak, and we can get explosive plays without throwing a deep ball. So you see them draft Colston Loveland, big yak guy. You see them draft Luther Burden. I mean, that's basically his big thing, is a slot receiver and a yak guy. And then Ben Johnson saying, where I've been in the past, slot receivers have been the focal point of the passing game. So if Luther Burden ends up being that slot receiver for them, that's so valuable in fantasy.
Yeah, and Colston Loveland can play in the slot too, and DJ Moore can, and Roma Dunze can. You know, and when, also with those first two draft picks, I just think about 2 tight end sets and 3 wide receiver sets, and how week to week they can do more personnel packages and play calling that matches up against the weaknesses of the opposing defense. But where it all pivots, and you know, my buddy James. I could tell some great stories about my buddy James here. I love you, James. Who's been a long-time listener to the show. We were hanging out at the end of school picnic. Our kids go to the same school, Waldorf School. Ask me about Waldorf School, and I'll evangelize about it. Anyway, like, what team is perplexing me right now? And I feel like Chicago is perplexing me a little bit, Craig, because I don't know if Caleb Williams is going to be good. I don't know. I don't. Well, because go ahead.
I was just saying it's interesting that I think a very underrated storyline this season is that Caleb Williams has traditionally, since at least college, I believe since high school, been a shotgun quarterback, just almost exclusively playing out of shotgun. Well, Ben Johnson's offense, he wants you to play under center. So they've said, we want Caleb Williams to be mainly an under center quarterback for us. And that's what we're going to be working on this offseason. We, hopefully it turns out and it goes well. If not, we're not exactly sure what we're going to do, because this is the Ben Johnson offense, is under center, play action. So if he can't do it, I mean, that's going to be a huge problem for them.
And also, just what you described is Caleb Williams operating in structure. And what was the big, and this goes for Cam Ward too, by the way, folks, what the big calling card that got them drafted number 1 is their play outside of structure, right? Patrick Mahomes. This is the copycat NFL for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Matt Waldman already. We're not even half an hour, and I've already mentioned the sage Matt Waldman twice, But, because he was one of the few ahead of the curve on Patrick Mahomes, where he watched Patrick Mahomes Texas Tech, and he said, this is gonna work. This guy's got it. This guy's got it. And the NFL was kind of afraid of a quarterback like him. They were more into like the guy he replaced, like Alex Smith at that time. I mean, just in the terms of like what coaches were drawn to. And then Patrick Mahomes does what Patrick Mahomes does. And now Zach Wilson. I mean, I think you can draw a line straight from what Patrick Mahomes did and the Jets saying, Zach Wilson could do that for us. And you laid it out well. You said what Ben Johnson wants. He wants Jared Goff or Joe Burrow, whatever. Well, Joe Burrow is a shotgun quarterback. What I mean is a quarterback that's going to just be an extension. Kyle Shanahan, right? Brock Purdy, an extension of the coach on the field. And I like to say, like, almost like the coach is controlling with a joystick with like the play design and play calling. Like, you understand the what and why. And this is probably why Bo Nix and Sean Payton's working out so well, right? Because
Yeah.
I think Sean Payton was able to see, like, oh, like when you have your football backpack with you everywhere you're like my son, long lost son. Like, I'm going to be able to explain to you why I think this is going to work and what we're going to do and what the point of it is, and you're going to understand. You're going to do it like it was me out there. Caleb Williams doesn't strike me as that kind of personality.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Well, we'll see how good Ben Johnson is.
Right. And there's the management side of it too. Do you meet the player? I mean, this is the player empowerment era. And Caleb Williams was also seen as the first name, image, likeness era big time quarterback, right? Like, he was kind of the transition into like, well, now these players are coming up differently, or some of them are. I mean, they're coming up with this sense of like controlling their destiny from the beginning, right? And how's that going to play? How's that going to play in the NFL? Well, we'll see. But the bottom line, I think, of this back and forth we're having, Greg, is it's a wide range of outcomes.
Oh yeah,
it's a wide range, and it could be that like what Ben Johnson's doing is going to work, and what he and Ryan Poles are dialing up personnel wise is going to work. But the Caleb Williams isn't the quarterback that's going to make it work.
I mean, they're going to know this year. There's not going to be any excuses after drafting 2 pass catchers at one at 10 and one at 39 or 38,
right?
30,
and rebuilding the interior offensive line, at least for this year. Yes. So there's no scapegoating the Joe Thuney, et cetera. Like, there's no scapegoating the offensive line. Okay, we got a couple more new coaches I want to touch on. I don't even know if we need to spend that much time on this one, but put Kellen Moore. I don't know. I mean, with Kellen Moore, it's almost like, why did he take the job, Greg? Can you tell why would he take this job?
Sacrificial lamb.
Right, yeah. Right. But what about Kellen Moore coming off of the Super Bowl victory?
Kellen Moore says process more than any other coach I've ever heard in my life. I made a cut up from just a single press conference of his, and it was, I want to say like 26, 27 times, like about 20 times he says process. But he does give us some good stuff every now and then, talking about, it certainly sounds like obviously Alvin Kamara is going to be a big part of their offense. Also, you can tell how much Kellen Moore just really loves Chris Olave, who I think could be a serious value where he's going in drafts right now. And then also likes Juwan Johnson, who sometimes goes undrafted in these best ball drafts. And Kellen Moore is saying, you've seen what where I've been before, tight ends. We've used them well, and Juwan Johnson gives us this vertical element that we really like. So he could be a nice kind of under the radar, post the hype. Yeah, because he's a guy who in past seasons people have been like, all right, Juwan Johnson, and it hasn't really quite worked out, but has a better coach, has a better play caller this year, and there's not a ton of options in New Orleans past Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating because, you know, um, Greg, you remember when that clip of Jerry Jones went around from that show Landman? Remember that? When he
Yeah.
was like, you remember that? And you saw the clip, And I mean,
Hmm.
I'm a positive guy. Okay. So when everyone's like, wow, Jerry Jones is a great actor. Wow. Getting some stuff off my chest. You're making, Greg, I appreciate you because you feel free. Like I'm on the couch now and I can get some stuff off my chest, and,
Do it.
and Jerry, everyone's like, he's such a great actor. And I don't want to mute the positivity. Let's be positive, even
Mhm.
towards someone like Jerry Jones. But he wasn't acting in that scene. He
Yeah.
wasn't actually acting.
Yeah.
And also, narcissists are great actors generally, like because that's kind of what it takes to want everybody to have their eyes on you, to be a narcissist.
Mhm.
Um, but I think Jerry was talking about the Cowboys. He wasn't acting. He all he had to do was just talk about the Cowboys, and it worked for the scene, right?
Mhm.
And I think of Jim Irsay, rest in peace. Also, I made a speech at the end of the last show I did about Jim Irsay, a true maverick. And man,
Yeah.
whatever circles you run with, if you're a maverick, I want to tip my cap to you, Jim Irsay, because he's another one that came up through the family business, right? Like, and
Mhm.
Jim Irsay, like, was a ball boy and did everything. Like, he knew how to run a football team. Like, it was what he majored in life, other than like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which is pretty awesome. Uh, anyway, and I feel like some of these organizations, Greg, are kind of unserious. They're more like a family business. And
Yeah.
I think that that's Gail Benson down here too. So I
For
can't
sure.
tell. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, Mickey Loomis shouldn't be there
Oh,
anymore. His time his time was up so many years ago.
and
Like,
mentioning
what
that, Gail
here?
runs
Like,
the Pelicans, right? And I don't know
mhm.
anything about NBA stuff, but she hired Joe Dumars, who I think has been away from basketball for like 10 years or something.
Mm.
And everyone's like, the worst hire. That's the worst hire. Like that's the worst possible hire she could have picked. So I'm just saying, like, there's a pattern.
The Derek Carr contract was just abominable. Like at that time, um, you really just look. There are quarterbacks that you can win a Super Bowl with, and then there are quarterbacks that you can't. Okay, so whole Geno Smith, Sam Darnold thing. I think Geno Smith is absolutely a quarterback you can win a Super Bowl with. Sam Darnold does not. He's not going to get, even if you have a bye, he's going to short circuit at some point during your playoff run. Derek Carr, not a quarterback you can win a Super Bowl with.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was
Mm-hmm.
apparent at the time of the signing. They gave him a huge contract. Listen, you're not winning a Super Bowl with him, and if you're not going to win a Super Bowl, then you you may as well go down a different path, a much cheaper path that isn't going to lock up your finances for a decade, and just try to find a winner another way. Like, why bring in an average guy? Why is that our goal? Why is that what we're shooting for? We should be shooting for the absolute moon. We should be shooting for, okay, maybe this process, now I'm saying process, maybe this process takes us a few years, but we're going to do it through the draft. We're not going to have a lot of money tied up. So once we get to that point, once we get to that precipice where we're right on the edge of contending for a Super Bowl, now we can spend some money and bring in people who can bring that trophy home.
Yeah, but you're assuming a coherent strategy and like actual meritocracy of an organization where I just don't. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if Kellen Moore. This circles back to like, why did he take the job? Like, is Kellen Moore going to make chicken salad out of this roster and this offense? Because no matter how much we like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and Juwan Johnson and Alvin Kamara, you still are dealing with Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler. And here's some coach speak for you. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but I believe the coach speak so far on the quarterback situation in New Orleans is we're going to let them have a chance. Like, don't think we're going to bring, no, Kirk Cousins is not coming, like they're just going
Mm-hmm.
to see what these guys can do. And it could be ugly. It could be really ugly.
Yeah.
Because like you said, even if there is a plan, it's a long-term plan. And a lot of the players that are here now might not even be there when and if it comes to fruition. So, good luck, Kellen Moore, I guess.
I mean, at least the bar for head coach in New Orleans is super low. Like
Right.
he
Just
could
that Dennis Allen was ever even hired in the first place. Dennis Allen was a punchline here like a year and a half ago. Like if you talk to any New Orleanian about Dennis Allen, it was a joke. I mean, you were suppressing laughter, and he was still a head coach for like another year and a half.
yeah,
Uh,
another terrible move by New Orleans, hiring a coach who had a terrible, terrible record and was obviously not a good head coach. But hey, he'd been in the building, so
Yeah,
let's go
exactly.
with Dennis
Gale knew his
Allen.
name. Gale knew his
Yeah,
name. Yeah. Well, and it's always conspiracy theories and skullduggery here in New Orleans because I mean, you can look at Derek Carr's career through some lenses and say it was mediocre. But if you just look at it through the lens of like with what he had to offer and how much money he made during his career, it was a big success. I mean, he turned what he had to offer in the NFL into a lot of money for a guy who did not give a team a chance to win a Super Bowl.
yeah,
And he retired, Greg, with like something like 31 million on the table, right? So there's all kinds of conspiracy theories here. Like, well, they're going to actually pay him like on the down low. They're going to find some other way to pay him that money, that he like did that for the team because they're in such a bad cap situation, and partially because they signed him. So maybe it's all right that what a guy too that also like seems to like be the bad guy when he leaves. Like, he's such a
yeah.
misunderstood character, Derek Carr, with his eye makeup.
I, lo-
What a
I love a QB that throws a franchise under the bus at church. That's really
yes, yes, yes. This is what Derek.
that's
This
what
is
you
one of the
want.
lasting images.
You want
Yes,
is
one of the
the
lasting.
face of your franchise. Good job, guys.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. And it's funny too because you mentioned church too in New Orleans and the Saints, and of course they are. People look it up, folks. Sorry, the Saints and the connection between the Catholic Church, not
Oh
exactly
yeah.
something like trigger warning.
Mhm.
But also just I was surprised. It was Greg. It was really a sign to me in the year 2024 that or was it early in 2025 that it really hit the press. I think it might have been early in 2025, but the point is it got no traction at all. Like this is where we are in the American news cycle arc, is that like the Saints lent resources to the Catholic Church to try to help them with the PR of their child rape scandal ongoing,
Mhm.
um, and the world just shrugged their shoulders. I mean, I'm shrugging my shoulders right now. So let's talk about football, right? That's why we're here. And see, that was a football adjacent topic. And we have one more
Mhm.
coach, Brian Schottenheimer. Speaking of Jerry Jones, it all comes back to
Yeah.
Jerry Jones and the family business. And this was one that, I mean, how we already know that Jerry Jones is out there because going into the offseason, there was talk like, well, are they going to draft Shadur and hire Dion and Dak Prescott have happy trails, and even Jerry seemed to participate in some sort of ruse, I would guess, for Deion Sanders to get renegotiated a larger contract at Colorado, like just kind of being a bit vague to say, "Oh yeah, Deion, oh yeah, great coach, great coach," and then he could go back to Colorado and say how how many zeros you're going to add to my contract. And then people joke like, watch them just promote. He's in the building, right? Watch them just promote Brian Schottenheimer. Well,
Yeah.
they just promoted Brian Schottenheimer. How's his press conferences been so far?
They've been all right. He definitely seems like a player's coach. At least that's how he comes off at the beginning here. Sometimes a player's coach will turn into a not player's coach. So we'll see if that changes. Really interesting to me that they asked him about the backfield. Where remember last year, the Cowboys were saying, "Oh, we're running back by committee. We're running back by committee." They were saying that during the offseason, and then they start out trying to be running back by committee, and Ezekiel Elliott is beyond washed. So it ends up being Rico Dowdle that becomes RB1. They just asked Brian Schottenheimer about the running back room. Are you going to be running back by committee this year? And he said, we don't know. It's too early to tell. Now, he could have very easily said, hey, Javonte Williams is our guy. He's the one we went out for first in free agency and brought him in. He's our RB1. That's according to him, it's kind of wide open right now. So if you're somebody who thinks that Javonte Williams looked really, really terrible last year, even though he got a bunch of opportunities and he still did not pay off his like 8th to 10th round price, well, you have the chance to run it back this year in Dallas. Um, yeah, well, I don't have the most faith in him as just a coach, I think. But not trying to pass too many judgments. Definitely not trying to have, a firm opinion that I've formed on somebody who's brand new to the job, because we've seen that blow up in people's faces with Dan
Yeah,
Campbell and Nick
right.
Sirianni. So just, hey, let's just wait and kind of see how it turns out.
Yeah, and the Cowboys, unlike the Saints, the Cowboys have a credible enough roster and enough team culture from guys like Micah Parsons and CD Lamb. I mean, CD Lamb was playing through an injury in meaningless games last year, and Dak
Mm-hmm.
Prescott, of course. That if Brian Schottenheimer's just a player's coach and just says like, okay, like it's your team, guys. Like I'm here to facilitate what you all want to do. They could be solid. I mean, they've had for a couple years back was kind of conventional wisdom. They had a good enough roster to win the Super Bowl. Now, the offensive line has gone through some turnover and, there's been some injuries and things like that. But unlike the Saints, I think that without the coach adding a lot of value, with the coach mainly just being like the bus driver and keeping the bus on the road, they could be all right. Uh, we got like a few minutes before we go off the rails and
Mm-hmm.
talk about whatever. I guess let's just circle back. I'd love going over these coaches, and we'll just keep adding to the file, and we'll keep checking in with you, Greg. And of course, again, folks, Coach Speak Index. And if you want to know more about the press conferences, you and Scott Barrett, one of my favorite people, did something with I think the Fantasy Point show. I want to say you
Mm-hmm.
guys did like 4 hours, right? Like, man,
Yeah.
4 hours,
Did
and that was just you. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did we did one on after each day of the draft, just kind of recapping all the press
Mhm.
conferences from day one, then from day two, and then from day three, and kind of just wrapping everything up. There was a ton of press conferences during the NFL draft. It's one of the busiest times of the year for me. Now, day one isn't too bad, because it's usually just one draft pick for each team. And, if it's not an offensive guy, then usually not getting as much out of there. Press conferences can be a little bit shorter. Day two is crazy because it's a couple rounds. It's like pretty significant draft capital. And that's when you start getting like 25-minute press conferences from like every team, which just, it's, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is,
But
and
it's a
there's
lot.
all kinds of. Well, I mean, there's so much to sift through. I mean, there's awkward moments. There's,
Mhm.
especially when you have the GM and the coach up there together. And
Yeah.
there's all kinds of stuff that we learn stuff sometimes about other players that we didn't know, or stuff about injuries that we didn't know, just kind of slipped in there when they're talking about the draft picks. So
Mhm.
there's enough there that you and Scott spent 4 hours on it, and I know you spent a lot more than 4 hours watching and listening, and even like going back and watching, listening. So tell me something that you feel like has been overlooked, that you saw it, you said that's important, and nobody's really talking about it.
I mean, the Tyler Warren stuff is just so incredibly bullish from what is coming out of Indy. And we can even look at before the NFL draft with them. I mean, last year, Shane Steichen talking about we want a complete Y tight end for our offense, and they weren't able to get that in the draft last year. This year they do. They spend the 15th overall pick on it. General manager Chris Ballard says Tyler Warren, easy pick. Was not a lot of discussion about who we should take. We knew this was Tyler Warren. He can do a lot. He can play multiple spots. Violent after the catch. He can play in the backfield. He has this element of toughness that I thought we needed to add offensively. Ballard said, I think Shane Steichen is going to find unique ways to use him. One of those guys who's always open. His hands are rare. Thought he had the best hands of anyone in the draft. Unique. He can handle a high volume of whatever we ask him. And then Shane Steichen says, yeah, he can do it all. Physical, gets yak, big target, plays above the rim. Even when guys are draped on him, he's still open. And we'll have fun with all the things that Tyler Warren is able to do. This is like Taysom Hill type talk that we're hearing from the Colts. And they've also talked about what a weapon he is in the red zone when they get close, and not even necessarily as a receiver, but with the backfield stuff. which makes me a little bit hesitant on Jonathan Taylor. Like, how many touchdowns does Tyler Warren end up, rushing touchdowns? Does Tyler Warren end up siphoning? And tush push is legal, and we've seen other teams use tight ends in the tush push in Green Bay and in Baltimore. So this is a guy who's going to be on the field for just an absolute ton of snaps. And I know people are queasy about, well, how good will this Colts offense be? Maybe it's not good, but if it's league average, Tyler Warren's a big part of that. And however many touchdowns they're scoring this year, Tyler Warren is going to be a part of that. And he's a guy that's going in the 10th to 11th round in best ball drafts right now. And he's just a really great pick, I think, as kind of a 3 tight end build where there's so much volatility at the position. And so often it's touchdown dependent in these half PPR leagues. And this is a guy who I think could score a good amount of touchdowns this year.
Yeah, I like to say there were 2 picks that were basically telegraphed, or the team was telegraphing who they hoped they would get, because Steichen just kept talking about how he wanted that complete tight end, like you said, even go before this offseason. And then they asked, I think it was John Lynch, they asked, what are you looking for in a first round pick? And he said, someone who sets the edge against the run. And that, I mean, Michael Williams, I mean, he does that. Yeah. Often you say that about your first round pick, but Michael Williams can be a lot more than that. Michael Williams could end up being one of the best 5 players out of this draft. But I don't know if Tyler Warren's going to be one of the best 5 players out of this draft, but for fantasy, he might be one of the best 5 players out of this draft. And Matt Batanti, who you and I talked about earlier before we went live, our offensive line guy, football guys, my good friend Draft Daddy, he was the first one on the show, like back in January or February. He raised the specter when we were talking about how he could be like a rich man's Taysom Hill for fantasy football,
Yeah,
and I don't know. And they have, and what you're saying is they're showing us they have an intent to do that. Now, will Wooler deliver? Will these coaches even be on the staff next year? Will the people that drafted Warren be on the staff? And, that's a bit to be continued. It's a big year for the Colts. Again, Jim Irsay, rest in peace. It's a big year for the Colts as far as a fork in the road. But we know what the Colts want to do. And we want to do for you today, enlighten you again. Everything's going on Coach Speak Index. Make sure this is how you can get your degree from the professor of Coach Speak, and just doing awesome stuff. And with Greg, with 15 like you, we might solve this completely. Football, no, it's unsolvable. That's why we love it. And then, but let's go off the rails. You and I could talk extensively about any number of topics, passionate about a lot of things. But one of the things I want to call out is that you again, we've talked about this. I talked about it on your show. You include a lot of karaoke, you include a lot of singing. It might just be self-indulgent, but this whole thing is self-indulgent. And we need more singing. Alan Watts' school of thought, like life is like music. You're supposed to sing or dance along with the music while it's being played, and you're singing. Who inspires you as a singer, and why did you want to make singing an element of what you do?
Oh man. Well, I never did karaoke until I moved to LA in 2013. I was 31 years old. And my background, like I grew up in a cult where we weren't allowed to listen to music that wasn't, like our church's music, and so I'd never listened to Bruce Springsteen's music before, until I was like 31 years old. And I met friends here in LA who were big Bruce Springsteen fans. And I was like, oh, this is great. And we would go. So part of the reason why I moved to LA was to go to this thing called Harmontown, which was a weekly podcast that Dan Harmon, the creator of Community, ran here in LA. Just like I'd been listening to this podcast, and I'd already been thinking about moving to LA. I was like, this is where I need to be. This is my people out here. So moved out, and then there was a ritual after the show. Everybody would go to this dive bar in LA here called the Drawing Room, and just very famous dive bar frequented by all kinds of people. I've seen Drew Carey. I've met Kristen Stewart in there, Laura Prepon. Andy Dick is banned from there, so I've not
That's like
met
an honor, right? Like you put that above the sign. Andy Dick is not allowed here. Come, welcome.
yeah. And they do karaoke on Sunday nights, and friends would go up and sing karaoke. And I'd just been listening to Bruce Springsteen for the first time, so I went up and sang like Thunder Road, and that's fun. That's fun. People enjoyed it, and I knew that I had a good voice from like church, and like I would sing church. But then like, well, let me try Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come, like a little bit different flavor genre, and sang that, and it played very well there. People were like, oh my, I can't believe that voice is coming out of someone who looks like this, which is kind of a mean thing to say to someone. Which I've heard many times. But and it just like felt really good, like very much in my wheelhouse. So I started doing more, soul stuff in that vein. Amy Winehouse, a lot of Amy
Oh
Winehouse. Like,
wow,
love
wow.
her music, and just like can really kind of crush that stuff. Do a lot of Etta James at last, like that's a really big one at uh people always love that. And yeah, just like, okay, this is my wheelhouse. I can really crush these songs. It feels good to sing them, and I love them. And I'm not like, I wish I was like James Brown level showman. I'm not.
Right,
For
right.
me, it's like whether I'm doing stand up or singing or whatever. Like I've never, like, it's, to me it's just okay. For the stand up, it's, I wrote really great jokes. Can we just appreciate these great jokes,
Yeah,
and not focus on the fact that I'm not stalking around on the stage like Dane Cook. And then same with with singing. People love a showman. I get it. I appreciate it. But it's like, all right, I'm just gonna sing it, and like, you can appreciate the voice part, and
right.
then like, can I just do that part?
Yeah,
Uh, I've tried to get into the um you know not interacting with people, but looking looking people in
sure,
the eyes
sure.
instead of staring, like, down at the karaoke
Hmm.
screen, just like being very comfortable on my end of the spectrum there. But end of the day, it's just like a really fun thing to do, whether out at a bar with friends, or doing it on a stream while I'm drafting a best ball team. I enjoy singing.
Yeah, everybody should sing more. Whether your voice is like conventionally a good singing voice or not, it's good for you. I would imagine, right? Music in general. I could go on and on and on and on about music. I mean, it's the language of the soul. I live in New Orleans for a reason. And you mentioned soul music, and you even talk about songs that are so emotional. The songs that the Bruce Springsteen. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but there was a law in the like aughts that if you were going to be a sports writer, it was the law that Bruce Springsteen was your favorite artist. You were not allowed to be a sports writer unless Bruce Springsteen was your favorite artist. No, but Bruce, especially from New Jersey, or like grew up in that kind of atmosphere. Sam Cooke, you mentioned Sam Cooke and his story. This is one of the things this is what I try to do in fantasy football. This is pretty much why I'm here, right? As I feel like if you know the story, if you know the background, what happens becomes so much more interesting and richer, right? So if you just listen to Sam Cooke's music and then you know his story, there's a documentary about it. But there's a singer down here, Greg, John Butte, like a jazz and soul singer, who is like, he sounds like Sam Cooke reincarnated.
Mm.
Um, his sister Lillian Butte. It's all families here. It's all like musical dynastic families. That's what New Orleans is made up of. And his sister Lillian Butte just joined the Ancestors. Um, he has a song about all of it. He had a group of like 5 sisters. Anyway, he did this version. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before. It makes me cry. A lot of things make me cry. Crying is good for you too. he did a version of
Mm.
Louisiana 1927, which is a Randy Newman song. It was at the first Jazz Fest after Katrina. So just that they pulled Jazz Fest off in 2006 was a big, big deal, just to even pull it off. And the people that were back there were the people that like were drawn here against all sense. Well, anytime you live in New Orleans, it's kind of against all sense, but especially right after Katrina, if you were some of the first people to come back, there was the people that were there. And he sang Louisiana 1927. And he, you know, and I'm listening to the book right now, I can't remember what it's called, about the 1927 flood and all of the things that intersect with that. But Rising Tide, I think it's called. But he sang and he changed the lyric, one of the verses to be about George W. Bush and so on, you know. And then you can hear in the crowd that it's so cathartic. And it doesn't even have to be for you about Katrina or your house being flooded, just loss. Just if you've experienced loss and had to go on, it's all there. Like it's all in that one rendition of that song. So yeah, and Amy Winehouse, I'm on the couch, so I get to do this. My name is Sigmund. I lost my mom in 2012. I could tell a lot of stories. Tony Belsky, Tony Bloom, Tony Albert. She was married 4 times, she would say. At least I found 4 men that would marry me. Tony McClay originally. And she died kind of sort of in an untimely way. I won't get into it. And when I went back home and I was driving around her little car, she had one tape in it that she always listened to. It was always Back to Black. It was always in her car. And, you know, in Amy Winehouse, I think Vincent Van Gogh also, there are certain artists, Nick Drake, you know, that you kind of can feel in their work that they were going to meet in Kurt Cobain, like an untimely end, right? Like you could just,
Mhm.
like they were almost already apologizing in their work because they knew that their time here was going to be short. And I felt like it was a way for my mom to like communicate with me from the beyond at that moment and that great grief, listening to Amy Winehouse sing, you know, try to make me go to rehab. Like
Mhm.
that song could apply. I don't want to say anything more. And Amy Winehouse, the brass bands down here play a lot of Amy Winehouse
Mm.
because it's so evocative, you know.
Yeah.
And like you said, you want the material to kind of speak for itself. So it's like not about the person singing it, and that's a New Orleans value here for sure. It's like you were just carrying on a chain of something. Don't give me the credit. Give the credit to the people that came before me, or I wouldn't have had anything to have carried on. Um, and so it's great. Everybody sing more. And I'll just say for the record also, and you can react to this. So my go-to karaoke song, you probably could guess it if you had enough guesses in time. My go-to karaoke song. What's the first thing that popped into your head? What's the first thing that pops into your head?
House of the Rising Sun.
Oh, well, you know, that's an interesting one. And I suppose if I was being honest about myself, maybe it's easy. Commodores. It's got to
Okay.
be. It's easy, man. Easy like Sunday
Yeah.
morning. I know the NFL got a hold of that one a few years back. You know,
Mm.
why would anybody want to put chains on me? You know, I paid my dues to make. Everybody wants me to be what they want me to be, but I'm not happy when I'm trying to fake it. I want to be high. For you to know the things I do are right. Anyway, so you know, this is always delightful. I'm so happy, Greg, that you're in our community and you're contributing what you have to contribute. And I can't recommend Coach Speak Index enough for the folks out there. And I look forward to many visits we have in the future and spreading the gospel, spreading the knowledge, because we want to do that for you. You're the best audience. You indulge us. You give us the privilege and pleasure to serve you, which is so very kind. And you're so kind because you're so classy.